I love the story of the woman who said to her husband, I had a dream about my birthday. And in the dream, I dreamt about a bracelet, a necklace, and earrings. What do you think that means? He said, wait for your birthday. And on her birthday, he handed her a gift, and she opened it, and it was a book titled Interpreting Your Dreams. If in middle school I had paid a psychic to tell me my future, and she would have said that I would play in the NFL, survive a near-fatal parachuting accident, pastor in 8 different churches and 4 different denominations, live in 6 states, go through a horrific divorce, and eventually settle in Marietta, Georgia, where I'd marry the love of my life, I would have demanded that I get my money back. None of that makes any sense at all. We don't know what we don't know about our life, looking backward or forward. Ecclesiastes 11:5 says, as you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. God's ways are mysterious and beyond us as creation itself. As a youth pastor in the Bay Area, I'd taken some of the students, it was a mix of girls and guys, and one van and probably about 10 of them, and it was a beach overnighter. And so we went there and we had a little camp and we set up our tents, and we'd gotten there early, and so it was kind of like, what are we going to do now based on what we had planned? So I thought, we'll go into town. So I'm in the van and kind of encouraging everybody, come on, let's go. And I'm goofing around, and so I'm gunning the van, to try to, play like, look, let's go. And they all get in, and I realized that I was in gear, and we were on sand, and I was off the paved area, and it sunk the back of that van to the axle. And now we're stuck big time. And so I had a AAA card and could have called, but it's these kinds of opportunities with youth where you can really make something happen. So typically what you want to do is make it into a contest, which is what we did. So we divided the group, equally, guys and girls, into 2 groups. And we said, all right, here's the deal. You've got 15 minutes to figure out how to get this fixed, right? We started with the first group, and I don't remember what they did, but they tried a variety of different things, and none of it worked. And now it was the second group's turn. And the second group had somebody who really knew what they were doing. They had gotten into the back of the van and got out the toolkit and taken apart the picnic table. And so they took the planks off the picnic table, dug down, got them back in there, and that allowed enough traction to get the van out. But the beauty of this story is when we put the picnic table back together, on the top are tire tread burn marks on the top of the picnic table. And I laugh whenever I think about that, because you imagine, a family can sit down and go, wait a minute. That makes no sense whatsoever. How could that even happen? And that's the way it is with our lives. Corrie ten Boom gave the great illustration, right, of the dilemma that we're in using a tapestry. When you look at the top of the tapestry, you see the pattern, it's beautiful. But if you've ever looked at the underside of a tapestry, it makes no sense whatsoever. All we can see is the underside. And then we try to make sense of that. And so all of a sudden we think we have a pattern developing, and the yellow string goes over here, and we're like, yeah. But then, so it's impossible. My life has been a roller coaster of highs and lows, marked by seasons of flourishing and seasons of struggle. Times of progress, peace, and prosperity, and times of pain, disappointment, and discouragement. I've known moments of victory and moments of defeat, seasons of success and seasons marked by serious setbacks. Based on the unexpected and painful details of what led to my divorce, details I shared last week, I stand here today only because of the grace of God. His mercies, new every morning, are the reason I'm emotionally healthy, mentally steady, and spiritually strong. God did that, not me. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. In a similar way, there was a time in my life felt shattered and beyond repair. But Jesus stepped into the wreckage, gathered every broken piece, and put me back together in a way no one else could. I was in pieces no person could mend until Jesus made me whole again. That's my testimony. That's my declaration. God did for me what I could never do for myself. So here's where pain, providence, and perspective come into play. When I speak of the miracle of God's grace, mercy, and healing, I must also acknowledge the reality that God allowed the bad to happen to me. Now, hear me carefully on this. I'm not saying that God caused it to happen. There's a big difference between cause and allow. God is not the author of evil. Evil's a very real thing, and we all live in the midst of it. We live in a broken world among damaged, sinful people who can cause serious trauma and pain. Lara Leitner put this in perspective when she wrote, "Trauma doesn't make people stronger. It is not a gift, a lesson, or some twisted path to growth. Trauma wounds the body, mind, and spirit. It damages the nervous system so that a person's body is no longer a safe place to live in. It robs sleep, appetite, joy, and ease. And yet people are told you're stronger because of what you went through. But that's not strength. That's endurance. That's survival." End quote. It's important to understand that God does not produce the trauma or the pain or the trials in life. Those are the result of the sinful, messed up world, broken world that we live in. But God does use that trauma and the pain and those trials to test our faith. James 1:2, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Verse 12, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Here's the difference between Joel Osteen and the Apostle Paul. Joel, quote, "Stop looking at your weaknesses and start declaring the power of I am. I am strong, I am healthy, I am blessed, I am beautiful, I am prosperous." The Apostle Paul. "And God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may dwell in me." Question, which of those two perspectives do you think plays better with our unsaved friends and neighbors? Is it the "look at me, I'm healthy and blessed and beautiful and strong and prosperous"? Or is it the "I'm not in control"? Many times I feel weak and powerless, swamped, covered up, inundated, overwhelmed, and desperate. But I serve a God who loves me and has got my back. He is in total control. And by his grace, I have a peace that defies explanation and the guarantee of heaven. Don't look at me, look at him. Here are several verses that speak directly to the value and purpose of trials, tribulations, and suffering, explaining how God uses them to strengthen, refine, and mature us. 1 Peter 1:6-7. "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Romans 5, 3-5. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit. 2 Corinthians 4, 16-17. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. No pain, no gain. No cross, no crown. For the child of God, struggle and pain are what transform knowledge into wisdom. Working through conflict or hurt can be painful, but it's what deepens trust, empathy, and understanding. Our faith grows deepest not in comfort, but in hardship. When we depend most on God, surrender our pride, and learn to persevere. This brings us to the perplexity and perspective of God's providence. God's providence refers to his continuous involvement in all of creation, guiding, sustaining, and governing everything according to his wise and loving purpose. Providence is a Latin word. It means to foresee or to provide. It means that God not only created the world, but also actively maintains it, directing events toward his intended ends. Nothing happens by chance. Everything unfolds under his sovereign will and wisdom, even when we can't see how on earth any of it makes any sense. Proverbs 16:9, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Albert Einstein said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. We often say things like, that just happened by chance. But what we usually mean is, I don't see the reason yet. From a biblical worldview, there's really no such thing as random. There's only limited perspective. The truth is, chance is simply the name we give to causes that we don't understand yet. Providence is what we discover when we realize God was present all along. If God is sovereign, and he is, then nothing enters our lives by accident. It may surprise us, it may hurt us, it may confuse us, but it doesn't catch God off guard. From our perspective, our circumstances can feel disjointed and random, looking up from the underside of the tapestry. But from where God stands, it is ordered, intentional, and purposeful. So the question should not be, where is God in all this? The question should be, what is God doing in all of this that I can't see yet? Many of the biblical stories speak to God's providence, his unseen working through everyday events to accomplish his divine purposes and achieve the results that he designed. But none greater, in my opinion, than the story of Joseph, who suffered incredible trials, injustices, and hardships. And it began when he was only 17 years old. As it turns out, Joseph, with God's help, wrote that book on how to interpret dreams. He was very good at it. He would interpret his own dreams to his brothers, one of which he probably shouldn't have gone with, was that they someday would bow down to him. Oh, man. That, along with the fact that he was obviously his father's favorite, and oh yes, the coat of many colors that he wore all the time, drove his brothers nuts. They grew to hate him. He was probably insufferable, but so obnoxious that you would conspire to kill him? Instead of killing him outright, they stripped him of his coat and threw him into an empty pit to die in the desert. Judah, the oldest brother, convinced them to sell Joseph to Ishmaelite traders for 20 pieces of silver. His brothers then dipped the coat in blood, making their father believe that Joseph was dead. Joseph lost his family and his home, while Jacob believed he'd lost a son. This is an Old Testament episode of Dateline. But wait, there's more. Joseph then became a slave in a foreign land, purchased by Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. After rising to a position of trust, Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him, and when he refused, she accused him of assault. Though innocent, he was thrown in prison. In prison, Joseph served his fellow prisoners, the cupbearer and the baker, both former Pharaoh officials. He interpreted their dreams accurately. But after being released, the cupbearer forgot his promise and failed to tell Potiphar. And Joseph remained in prison for 2 more years. So let's filter all this through the doctrines of the prosperity gospel and summarize the magnificent blessings that God rewarded Joseph for his faith and obedience. He was hated, envied, and betrayed by his own brothers, torn from his family and sold as property, wrongly accused and imprisoned, forgotten and left to languish in prison for years. All of this takes us to the pain, perplexity, and perspective of providence. Through all the pain and suffering, Joseph goes from the pit to the palace. The amazing conclusion to the story takes place in Genesis 50, 15 to 21. Joseph's brothers, with their sin fully exposed, were backed into a corner, and they're terrified for their lives. In their fear, they resorted once again to deception, claiming that their father instructed Joseph to forgive them. It was desperate. It was pitiful. When the message reached Joseph, he wept. And instead of delivering the punishment they expected and deserved, he spoke words of amazing grace. Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Then Joseph reassured them, spoke kindly to them, and promised to provide for them and their children. You intended to harm me, but God in his sovereign providence took the evil that resulted and reshaped it so that it produced something unexpectedly beautiful and good. Joseph was in pieces no person could mend until God made him whole again. All of this happened over a very long period of time. It began when he was 17 and he lived to be 110. The betrayal was real. The pain was real. The injustice was real. But it was never random. What they intended for evil, God was already using for good. Joseph is a type of Christ. Think about it. Like Christ, Joseph was deeply loved by his father, conspired against and plotted for death, sold for pieces of silver, falsely accused and unjustly condemned, forgotten by man, remembered by God, saved both Gentiles and his own family. What men meant for evil, God used for good, and ultimately exalted to reign and reconcile. God wasn't reacting to Joseph's story, he was redeeming it. And when you truly believe that, you don't need revenge. You don't cling to bitterness, and you don't settle the score, because you trust that God is a better judge and a better redeemer than you could ever be. What looks like chaos from the pit looks like purpose from the palace. And one day we will see that nothing in our lives happened by chance at all. Because we know Romans 8:28, that God causes everything to work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. One of the passages that I held on to was Joel 2:25-27. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. You will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders for you. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, and that there is no other. God promises that even after evil has caused deep loss, he can restore what has been restored and provide abundance again. He then uses our healing to remind us that he alone is faithful and at work in our lives. God did restore the years that the locust ate away in my life in ways I could never have imagined. Jesus stilled the storm in my life and brought peace and new beginnings. The greatest of which was with Melinda, my wife of now 28 years. From what was intended to harm me, God in his sovereign providence produced something unexpectedly beautiful and good. And it happened despite my not wanting it to happen. I was clueless, but God was actively working out his plan. When I arrived and had come to Atlanta, I had been coming here for about a week. I decided, ministry they were very good to me, but it was too painful for me to continue in ministry, so I had an idea to start a business, and in doing so, it could have a kind of a ministry component to it. The best place was to do that was I deemed Atlanta, so I was coming here on like a 2-week basis, and then I'd go home for a couple weeks and come back here. And during that time, I stayed with a couple. I can't remember how we connected. He was a professional baseball umpire. She was a flight attendant with Delta. And she played mahjong with Melinda, who I didn't know. And so they would communicate, and I guess she was trying to say, to Melinda, hey, there's this guy, and she's got that whole thing going, And I don't really know what's going on with any of that, but it didn't matter because I really wasn't interested at all based on what I had come out of. And Melinda wasn't interested either. But she was very persistent, and she kept going on and going on and going on. And so finally, she, in a phone call with Melinda, was trying to give this her final appeal that, no, you've got to at least go on a date. And so she's listing off all of these things that she thought Melinda would really be impressed with me. And in every case, it was the opposite, It's like he played in the NFL. And this is crazy with Melinda because, her dad, which some of you know, but probably most of you don't, is in the Georgia Hall of Fame. He was a quarterback 1932 for Georgia. But she loved tennis, was an A tennis player, and didn't really care much about football. So it was like, we're not doing that. And she lists off a whole bunch of stuff, and the same reaction, everyone. And then at the end of that discussion, as if to kind of throw this in as a negative, well, there is this thing. In the morning, he wakes up very early. He's usually made coffee, and he's sitting at the kitchen table reading his Bible. And that was it. Had she not said that, it would have all ended right there. But because of that and where Melinda was at in her spiritual journey and what she had experienced, she perked up and said, okay, I'll give it a shot. 36 years ago, I pulled into the driveway of the home I've now lived in for 28 years. I was in an ugly brown Ford station wagon that I bought for $1,600, praying that it would survive the drive from Napa to Atlanta. Based on everything I had gone through with the first and only other girl I had ever dated, I sat in the car seriously wondering if this was a good idea. Got out of the car, walked to the front door, knocked on the door. The door opened just long enough for me to say in my head, oh, she's pretty. And the door closed. She shut the door. I'm now standing there. What on earth? And here's what's going on the other side of the door. Melinda had been in this battle as well and praying, I'm not sure about this, and God, please, if it's going to work, And she said in her head when she opened the door, God, you sent me the biggest one ever. What's up with that? And her reaction was to just shut the door. And I waited, and the door opened again, and we went on our blind double date that night, pizza and bowling. And the rest is history. Here's the conclusion. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding. In all of your ways, submit to him, and he will direct your paths. Let's pray.